completely appropriate that Bradley Horowitz would be the final speaker as we wait to hear the decision of the judges and the final awards for the entrepreneurship competition, because he is an entrepreneur and he has many badges to prove it. He did computer science at Michigan and came to the MIT Media Lab, which is a highly entrepreneurial department at MIT, and he quit before he was going to get a PhD, and most people, I've seen a lot of studies that suggest that the best entrepreneurs are those who just can't stand that last year of finishing the thesis and just want to get out there and do something, and Bradley did that. He is in charge of Google Apps, so if you need word processing in the cloud, that's it. If you got Gmail, which is probably the fastest growing email, hundreds of millions of users of Gmail. And so it's quite, and he loves Barcelona. He knows that this is the place to be if you're an entrepreneur. I personally think that at the cocktail hour you ought to ask him when Google's going to set up a lab here, but then that will be food for thought. Bradley also, before going to Google, was at Yahoo, and prior to autonomy, he founded a company called Virage, a company widely recognized as the market creator and leader for advanced media indexing and analysis. He helped the company grow from a garage-type startup to a NASDAQ IPO. So he has the experience. He's done it before. He's walked the walk and talked the talk, and it's time for me to exit stage left and give you Bradley Horowitz. Brad, thanks for coming out here.
Thank you. So thank you for that generous introduction. It is great to be here in Barcelona. It's a city that I love, and I'm extremely impressed with the quality of dialogue I've seen here at this conference and the spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship that I feel in the room. So you can't have a conference about innovation without talking about the internet. And the beginning of my talk, I'm going to remind you of what is already obvious to most of you, the amazing growth and opportunity that the internet represents. And I'm also going to talk about how the internet itself creates a climate of innovation, that some of the fundamental underpinnings of the internet lead to an environment which is about empowerment and innovation. So to do that, I'm going to first walk you through some numbers, and these numbers are staggering. The first numbers will look at where we are, and then we're going to look at where we're going. So just 10 years ago, if you think back to 2000, the internet wasn't even new then. I founded my company in 1995. The internet bubble was in the late 90s. By 2000, the internet was something everybody knew about. It was on the covers of magazines, et cetera. But only 1.7% of the world population, about 70 million people, were online in 2000. Today, there are 1.8 billion internet users worldwide, which is about a quarter of the world's population. In the top 16 countries, about 30% of people's leisure time is spent online, which is an amazing statistic, an amazing number, and amazing growth over the last 10 years. In Europe alone, there's 425 million internet users, and over half the population is online, and that has tripled in the last decade. Growth is actually fastest in the Middle East, Africa, closely followed by Latin America. Let's look at mobile. In mobile, there are currently 4.6 billion mobile subscribers, which means 2/3 of the world population uses mobile phones. 3/4 of those users are in developing countries. And in India, more than 50% of the population have mobile phones, which is especially notable that when you think about the fact that only 1/3 of the population have toilets and sanitary conditions like that. So more people have mobile phones than have toilets in India. Amazing. Our relationship with our phones is also unique. So 2/3 of the people keep the phones next to them in bed. So when you go to sleep, even in your most private kind of intimate quarters, your phone is there by your side. I know I'm guilty of that. And the behavior starts early. In the UK, children are more likely to own a cell phone than they are a book. That's an amazing statistic, and perhaps not a great one. 86% of UK children aged 7 to 16 own a cell phone, and only 73% own a book. It's amazing. Interestingly, texting is becoming more popular than talking. And in the US, in the past 2 years, mobile traffic actually dropped 15%, but text message traffic doubled. And so people are beginning to use their phone, not in the traditional sense of just voice communications, but also as a means of accessing the internet, of doing textual communications, media communications. And I think we understand that trend. As the smartphones like Android and iPhone get more and more powerful, the phone gets more sensors, it's able to do more and more for you beyond just being a point of presence for voice. Over 1/5 of cell phone users set up first dates via texting, and about the same number use text to break up with their partners. So people are using this for all kinds of forms of communication. Media itself has gone digital. We heard about this in some panels earlier, but there are now 800 exabytes of digital information in the world. That's videos, photos, music, text, etc. And photos, 2.5 billion photos are uploaded just to Facebook each month. It's an amazing statistic. In video, every single minute of the day, 24 hours worth of new video content is uploaded into YouTube. So in the time I've been speaking here, 5 or 6 days worth of video content end to end has been uploaded into YouTube. It's just an explosion in capability and the amount of content. Now, by comparison, in 2003, only 5 exabytes of data was recorded. That was kind of the extent of the media corpus at that time. Now more than that is generated every 2 days. It's extraordinary. And as the content has moved online, consumption has followed the content online. For video, 1/3 of Europeans watch video at least once a month. In China, 240 million people regularly watch videos online. About 1/4 of them actually stopped watching TV last year, so that's a transition from traditional media into the new online experience. In digital music, sales were 20 million in 2003. Today, 4.2 billion. And in news, today, more Americans get their news online than from traditional papers, which is an extraordinary statistic. So that's where things are now. But let's project and see where things are going. If we roll forward a decade from now to 2020, things are even more dramatic. And all of this really is based on trends in network effects, things like Moore's Law that make this possible. If we look at where we expect to be in 2020, the internet grows to 5 billion subscribers worldwide. Connecting at speeds of gigabit internet will be the norm, so bandwidth will be aplenty. In mobile, there'll be 10 billion mobile subscribers, more subscribers then than there are today, people on the planet. The majority of the world's population will transact electronically through their mobile phones, so commerce will follow this trend and move to mobile as well. And video will dominate this mobile traffic, so as much bandwidth as we expect to have, we'll again see high definition applications consume that bandwidth. And the amount of data that we expect to be produced in this world of 10 years from now will grow at least 44 times to 53 zettabytes. All the media you care about or could possibly care about will be online at that time. Your pictures, your contacts, your friends, your family, your history, it will all be there, as well as the kind of commercial content you might want to consume. So it's an incredible thing to think about how far and how fast we've come on the internet and where we're going. And sometimes we take it for granted. Sometimes it's good to take a step back, look at these numbers, and remind ourselves that we are in the midst of a trend that is unique in the history of man. And what else is interesting is that we're just starting out. If you look at that trend, we're just in the kind of knee of where things get interesting. People like Nicholas Negroponte have been predicting this for years, and before that, the whole cybernetics movement at MIT. But it's happening in our lifetime. It's happening before our eyes, and it's an amazing phenomenon to be a part of. I like to think of the internet as a teenager, and it has many of the same characteristics of a teenager. Kind of looks grown up, but isn't. It thinks it's mature, but isn't. Has amazing potential, and has barely begun to show its impact on the world. Its best years are ahead of him. So in the internet, there is no steady state. There's one thing that I've learned in the years working in this domain is that change is inevitable, and change has to be factored into your plan. Disruption is what makes the internet tick, and companies that ignore this phenomenon do so at their own peril. So talking about the big bets that this new internet will bring us, we see a number of categories: the rich web, the people web, the adaptive web, the infinite web, and the impossible web. And I want to talk about each of these and drill into them and tell you what I mean by them. So let's start with the rich web. In the early days, the web was very simple, very textual, about pointing your browser at a document, rendering that document, and the hypertext within that document allowed for exploration elsewhere. There were very few images or videos. There was certainly no concept of social interaction, and things like tweets came from birds, not from people. Today, the internet is the hub for every type of media that we care about, whether it's TV, movies, everything in between, maps, and moreover, applications. So the rich web includes not only the promotion of media content, but turning the web from a flat sequence of documents into rich applications like Google Maps, where I load a page, and the page itself is an application that resides in the cloud. I can scroll, I can interact without leaving that page. And innovations like AJAX, HTML5, improve the platform upon which these applications are built. And increasingly, you will see more and more sophisticated applications. Things like Gmail and Google Docs are examples of the rich web, turning it from more than just a web of pages into a web of apps. Increasingly, the web is about people. This is a new dimension, relatively new, that has grown up in the last decade. 75% of web users in the US have a profile on a social networking site. 800 million unique users of social networking across the world. These are extraordinary figures. It is a phenomenon. It is not a fad or a flash in the pan. It's something that is here to stay. And increasingly, we are bringing the power of people to Google and all that we care about and do at Google. If you think about Google's original innovation, PageRank, it was really about understanding that documents alone could not determine relevance. We had to understand the interlinking, the link flux of those documents to provide the Google search algorithm. And those links, of course, were made by webmasters, who are people. So in some sense, Google's history goes back to what is fundamentally a social or people-oriented signal to do the magic that led to the differentiation that Google brought to the world. In many ways, this phenomenon of the web being about people is just the web catching up with life. When you see something interesting, when you hear a funny story, the first impulse that we have as human beings is to share that with others. And increasingly, the web is becoming the means by which we can simply and effectively reach the audience of people that cares about us, our friends, our followers. The adaptive web. So in many ways, we think about adaptive as adapting to the form factors and the devices that have yet to be invented. We spoke extensively about mobile and how mobile is changing the web, both in terms of the form factor, the fact that on a smaller screen I have to be much more deliberate and thoughtful about the information I present, but it's also changing it in terms of the modes of interaction. It's hard to type on a tiny little screen, so things like voice interfaces become more important. Increasingly, sensors in the phone, things like accelerometers, things like touch-sensitive displays, change these modes of interaction. And so it's not just a smaller web or a less capable web, it's a completely different experience that brings in things like location that we heard about yesterday, et cetera. And it's not just mobile phones, it's devices like the iPad that I have here. So there's devices that have yet to be invented, things like projection onto my glasses, et cetera. So the web needs to anticipate and adapt to the new form factors, the new devices, the new sensors that change the rules of the game. The infinite web. So the infinite web really speaks to some of the phenomena that Chris Anderson spoke about in the long tail, that in the world of scarcity, in the physical world, there is finite shelf space. There's a fixed amount of content that a user can actually reach as they walk into a library or walk into a store. The web, however, is infinite in the sense that there's unlimited possibility, that having a single book, if you want to use that term, on a digital shelf does not limit you from having another one. So that lack of scarcity and the abundance of the web changes things dramatically. So there's a video on YouTube called Charlie Bit My Finger. I don't expect any of you may know that by name, but it's one of the many, many videos, part of that 24 hours of content that's uploaded every single minute. And it's a very simple video. It's a video of a young child biting his brother's finger. And that video has been viewed through viral mechanisms over 200 million times. It's actually the second most popular video on YouTube in YouTube's history. The most popular one, I was actually a little bit surprised to learn, because this is a fairly recent phenomenon. Can anyone guess what the most popular video is? It's not the evolution of dance. That's what I would have guessed. It's Lady Gaga Bad Romance. I don't know if that's as popular in Barcelona as it is in the States, but Lady Gaga's taking over. She has over 1.5 billion views across her videos on YouTube. And what's the next great pop star? Well, in April, just a few months ago, a 12-year-old named Grayson Chance entered his school's talent show in England, or in Edmond, Oklahoma, and he sang a Lady Gaga song called Paparazzi. The next day, he posted this to his YouTube channel, and now he has 25 million views and a record contract. And so YouTube is a means of not only consuming new media, it's a means of tying back to traditional media. And as we heard on panels today, traditional media is changing and adapting and encompassing and embracing these new formats. So the internet and the web give everyone global reach. Whether you're at a small village in Oklahoma or in Los Angeles or Barcelona, you have a platform by which you can reach exactly the people who care about the content that you are creating. The impossible web. The cloud model of computing allows us to do things that were previously impossible given the constraints of devices and computing power of the day. So the iPad is a fantastic device. I enjoy consuming media on it. I find it extremely useful and portable, especially for travel. But it is not the most powerful computer that I've ever used or has been produced. In fact, it's fairly modest in terms of its computing power. And I think that's an amazing insight. And what has happened is the computing power has shifted from the device into the cloud itself. I want to give you a couple examples of this. One of them that we're very proud of at Google is something we call Google Translate. Google Translate allows for the globalization of web pages using techniques that are cloud resident. So the model that we use to build these translations depended on the data of the web itself. And now when you're reading a page in English and you want to translate that into your native tongue, perhaps Spanish, with a click of a button, Google servers can transform that page into Spanish and deliver it back down to your browser. That's a computationally expensive task. It involved gathering huge amounts of data that would overwhelm a single device, but because this is a cloud-based model, we can take advantage of that asymmetry in the computing power we have in the cloud versus the device to deliver this amazing product. Another example is speech recognition. So I mentioned that small keyboards were hard to type on. Android features things like voice recognition. So I can type in Barcelona, or I can speak to my phone and say Barcelona restaurant, and it sends that sound sample up to the cloud for recognition. It uses all of the context to determine exactly what I might be saying, beams down the results, and I don't have to peck on a small keyboard. It's an amazing innovation, and again, it depends on web scale, both in terms of the data we collected to drive the recognizers, as well as the compute power that's back in the servers. So the cloud model allows for these kinds of innovations where the device can do what it does best, sensing and providing amazing display and feedback to the user, and the cloud can do what it does best, farms and farms of servers that are at the service of the user. So what does all this mean? In terms of innovation and entrepreneurship, it means that the barriers to innovation are really dropping to zero. And this is changing many things we traditionally thought about innovation. One of them is really access to capital and access to resource. If you think about even when I started my company 15 years ago, it was required that you had relationships with venture capitalists, that you were well-funded, that you were able to get that initial seed capital that would allow you to buy the equipment and hire the talent that allowed you to start a company. And that is changing because today, with these lower barriers, you can use cloud-based models like Amazon Web Services or the Google App Engine to scale adaptively. The barrier is simply swiping your credit card and getting off the ground, and as your business scales, the infrastructure scales with it. Moreover, everyone is your talent. So more and more companies are becoming virtual. Google, for example, has 43 offices worldwide. And these are not sales offices where we just interact with customers. These are development offices. Development never sets on the Google company because we work closely with offices from Zurich to Tel Aviv to Mountain View headquarters. And we use the very tools that we're creating to collaborate with these offices. So many of these have sprung out of our own needs as a global company. But talent is now everywhere, and you can reach interested, capable talent wherever you happen to be. And then everyone is your customer. As we spoke about in terms of the power of social networking, et cetera, tools like Google allow interested, qualified audiences to connect to the content and services that you create. So whereas before location mattered in that sense, now you can be wherever you're at, wherever is most comfortable for you, and run a global company. It's all because of the internet, and it's part of the way that we think at Google. I want to shift the conversation now to Google specifically and talk about some of the ways that we've set up our company, the way that we think about innovation, the way that innovation has been built into the fabric of the company, and share that with you. First of all, I think the role of management itself is very, very different in a company like Google and in an internet-based company. Management used to be about top-down control. It was the management that set the strategy. It was the management that told the workers what to do. And it was the management that was held accountable. And at Google, we really believe management has a different role. Our role is to create the culture of innovation where people feel empowered and ideas flow from the bottom up. And there are many, many structures within Google that encourage this and enforce this. Our role as management is to encourage transparency, to make sure that people have the resources they need to do their jobs and be effective in this model. So in terms of transparency, we share as much information at Google as we possibly can. The quarterly board report, which is the report to the board of directors from the CEO, is shared with the entire company. Now, due to Sarbanes-Oxley and several financial regulations, we can't share all of the forward-looking financial results, so those are redacted, and you will see some slides that are blackened out. But everything we can possibly share in terms of the strategy, in terms of the performance, we do. So we comply with regulations, but we share as transparently as possible. We treat people with respect. We understand that the more the individual worker understands about the overall company performance and strategy, the better they're going to be able to contribute. Another example of transparency is our use of Google Docs. When you use Google Docs within Google, the default mode for any doc you create is shared within the organization. So by default, any document I create is searchable, discoverable, and transparent to any other employee within the organization. And again, it's possible using our tools to come and restrict the audience, but the default, what we expect people to do in the general case, is to be transparent. And this works because we trust our employees. There's no better way to inspire loyalty and to get that trust than to treat people with this respect. Another principle is accessibility, to put as few layers between the people who are, quote unquote, at the top or running the company and the people who do the actual work. This has been part of our management structure. In the early days, you heard stories about managers who had 50 direct reports. I think the general rule of management is about 6 to 8 is what most companies do. Google had 50 people reporting into one person. We've since reduced that, so it's no longer typical to find managers who have 50 direct reports. But the philosophy behind that is specifically designed to reduce micromanagement. If you have 50 reports, there's no possible way you can get in and dictate in a top-down fashion exactly what each of those 50 people should be doing. The best you can do is help solve problems for those that are shooting up flares and conveying that they have an unmet need. Another example of accessibility is a ritual that we have at Google called TGIF. Do you guys know what TGIF stands for? Yes, thank God it's Friday. And this is something we do on every Friday afternoon. The founders of the company, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, get up on a stage like this. The whole company gathers, both within Mountain View and the other remote sites, and we have a conversation. Usually there's 10 minutes of announcements and kind of recent breaking news. We use it as an opportunity to share within the company. But the most interesting part of TGIF is the open mic aspect. And mics are set up in the aisles, and we have an electronic system that we call Google Moderator, which allows people to submit questions. And any question is fair game in the TGIF setting. And so people can come up to the mic and ask us questions from the absurd to the sublime. They can ask us questions about technical decisions that the company has made, business decisions that the company has made, cultural decisions. How come you no longer serve apple pie in the company cafeteria? It really does range. And what's great is that the founders themselves, Larry and Sergey, answer these questions honestly and transparently. And many times they call other experts up on stage to help them or assist them. Many times their answer is, I don't know. We should have apple pie in the kitchen. I'll look into that and make sure we get it back. So that level of transparency and accessibility is key to the way we run the company. And it's true not only for Larry and Sergey, but for managers throughout the company. In this way, I think being transparent, we empower people, we create a culture, and I think the most important message I want to convey, I'm telling you some of the cultural artifacts and techniques that we use at Google, but it is more about the culture than anything else. And when we onboard new employees, we often use this word called googly. It's kind of the adjective version of what would Google do? And it's a word that's ill-defined. There's no prescriptive 10 commandments of what is and what isn't googly, but it's the embodiment of our cultural virtues, the things that we believe to be true, things like follow the user, things like open is better than closed, things like be data-driven. So these are all aspects of being googly, and what's important in your early onboarding into the company is that you imbibe these cultural aspects. And then once you're googly, you're entrusted to act like a Googler and make decisions without a lot of oversight. I want to talk a little bit about this concept of open and this concept that the information itself wants to be free. It's one of the main premises of Google's business. In the old days, control of information was a business, and today there are still businesses which are based on being a choke point for information. We think that that's going away. We think it's evil in the Google parlance, and increasingly the information itself wants to be accessible and free. In fact, our whole mindset around this is changing. When I was in school, if you shared your homework with somebody, that was called cheating. You know, that was a very bad thing, and you could get in a lot of trouble for sharing work like that. Today, that's called collaborating, and it's a life skill that you better learn in school and beyond, or else you're going to fail in the workplace. So the very terminology that we use to describe this sharing gesture is changing in response to the internet and this world. A more sobering example is things like the BP oil spill. And because that data, both by the US Department of Energy and other government institutions, but also Google has worked to massage this data into means that can be easily rendered on a map, people have created all of these surprising and derivative applications that can overlay the oil spill on top of other parts of the map to give it context and scale. So it's not just floating out there in the Gulf, but you can actually see that it encompasses a huge fraction of Europe if you overlay it. And this is surprising. This isn't something we ever anticipated. We didn't release the data, and the government didn't release the data because they wanted somebody to do that. It's one of the kinds of serendipitous applications that develop when you empower people with data and the means to visualize and put that on a platform. Another example, which I won't go into in detail because my time's running out, but that I've been following closely is the work that The Guardian has done in exposing the MPs' expense reports, which were then crowdsourced, and people found anomalies and called them to the fore. The Guardian did a great job in doing what even a big team of investigative reporters couldn't do at the level of detail that the crowd did it. So the information wants to be free, and when it's freed up that way, all kinds of good public benefit accrues. Another thing we do at Google is give people permission and really a mandate to work on things outside of their day job. We call this the 20% program. And 20% is a pretty sizable chunk. You can imagine in the 5-day US work week, that's one day. So imagine that people took every Thursday and worked on something that they were passionate about. And this is something that serves many purposes. One is that it allows innovation to flower within the company, that it's not segmented off to an innovation lab where some tiny fraction of people think about the future. It's everywhere. It also does cross-pollinate ideas. So in addition to your day job, perhaps on Google News, you might be working on something like Google Translate. And as part of that, you see opportunities to build bridges between what would otherwise be siloed products. And it's been estimated by Marissa Mayer, one of our VPs of product, that 50% of the features you see in Google products started as a 20% project. So it is a huge means of driving innovation within the company, and we can't predict what people will create. We give them the paint, we give them the canvas, and we as managers, part of our job is to identify the winners and feed them with additional resource to spot the ideas that didn't work out and learn from them and redirect that energy into other projects. It's more about kind of tending to the garden than growing the vegetables by sheer will. Now, part of this process for us is to decide with data. This isn't something where we as managers use our opinions or kind of have a cult of personality at the top of the company. We try to make our decisions informed on actual usage, and it's one of the great things about the internet is that we can run real experiments with massive audiences and actually determine empirically what ideas are good and sticking and driving the kinds of behaviors that we'd like to see and services for users and which aren't. And so it's great to live in a world where the internet itself, the product itself, informs the evolution and future of the product. And we decide with data. In Google meetings, it's generally not helpful or valuable to start a sentence with "I think." It's helpful to start it with "the data shows." And we're a culture that believes in dashboards, believes heavily in statistics. We have a huge team of people that are focused on statistics and analytics that help drive this level of thought and diligence around being data-driven. Part of this also is having the courage to fail. If you think about Thomas Edison, there's some great quotes there that the quickest way to success is to double your rate of failure. That when he tried, I think it was 10,000 different filaments, he said, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that haven't worked yet." And it's this kind of persistence and willingness to have the courage to fail and to create a culture where failure is not a scarlet letter or something that is going to curse your career. Failure is encouraged, failure is welcomed, failure is part of innovation, and you need to have the courage to fail in exactly the right way. Part of this is also hiring, and Google has an extremely diligent hiring practice, more so than any company I've ever seen or imagined. It's extremely democratic, and it involves candidates interviewing with a large panel of interdisciplinary leaders and other Googlers. The feedback from those people is taken very, very seriously, and as such, it's a process that is very, very effective in bringing in exactly the right kind of people that will thrive in the environment I've been describing. The most important aspect is really around passion. That's what we look for. And it's not only the computer science degrees or the accomplishments in your previous work history. It's really having that passion for something. A good example of what that passion leads to is something called Google Sky, which is an application for Android phones. It's fantastic. You can hold your Android phone to the sky, and based on the compass and the direction of gaze, it will project onto the screen the stars that are in that part of the hemisphere. And this was created by some engineers in our Chicago office, I believe, or actually the Pittsburgh office, that were astronomers. They were passionate about astronomy, and it led them to creating this product. It wasn't something from a top-down mandate that we needed a Google Sky product. It was the Googlers' own passion that led to this, and it's something that's been extremely meaningful and successful in the marketplace. Finally, I want to suggest that you think big. This was something that was really eye-opening as I came from one great internet company, Yahoo, and transitioned into my role at Google. It became apparent to me how high the founders and leadership of Google set their sights. Think about something like the Barcelona Cathedral. It took 150 years to build, and it's something that's still standing today. That's the way that we want to think about our contributions at Google. I started the talk by saying the internet is about disruption, and that's true. But we want to try to build platforms and value for users that is durable, that is big, that is game-changing and world-changing in its scope. I think the Google search engine, Google's initial contribution, was a contribution of that magnitude. We're not looking to enter markets where Google, because of its reach, et cetera, might have a fine business, but it's just a me too and also ran in the space. We're looking to do things where our scale, our platform, our capital expenditure over the years bring something that's new, compelling, and different and unique to the market. And I think there's plenty of great examples of that. Things like Google Maps, for instance, things like Android itself are examples of opportunities to think big, change entire industries and the way that they function. And I would encourage you as entrepreneurs, in the same way we have massive resource at our disposal at Google, but the internet is this democratizing force which allows individuals in their pajamas in their living room to access this global network of infrastructure and audience that the internet represents. So please think big and start with a single big step. So finally, this is really the perfect convergence. I hope that this talk has re-inspired you and had you rethink the internet as a means of fostering innovation. It does change everything. And even having been in this industry for 20 years, when I take a step back and I think about the time in which we live, the opportunity that we all have as individuals and collectively as part of this society, it is a unique moment. And there is no excuse for thinking small, for doing incremental things, for being petty and having a mentality of scarcity. Get out there, think big, think about what you can do for the world, think about what you can do for each other, think about what you can do as a community to make this world a better place in Barcelona and beyond. Thank you. I'll be around for questions, and I always like to share my email address. If you have any thoughts or concerns or just want to talk to somebody at Google, my email is bjh@google.com. I don't carry business cards, so that's bjh@google.com if you'd like to reach me. Thank you.